long before empires imposed unified laws, standardized money, or standing armies. Something far more powerful was already stitching the ancient world together. Prices. Not edicts, not borders, not conquest, just the quiet, relentless logic of exchange. By the time Rome sent its legions marching across the Mediterranean, merchants had already accomplished what Rome would spend centuries trying to formalize. They had transformed a fragmented, violent, multilingual world into a single economic arena, one where goods held broadly predictable value from one shoreline to the other. And the people responsible weren't emperors. They were traders. Welcome to the financial timeline, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. To grasp how radical this really was, you need to picture the Mediterranean roughly 12 centuries before Christ. This was not a unified world by any modern definition. It was chaos. City-states rose and collapsed constantly. Kingdoms fought over pirates ruled open waters. There was no shared legal framework, no common currency, and no central authority capable of enforcing contracts beyond local borders. Most people never traveled more than a few miles from where they were born. Outsiders were distrusted by default. On paper, large-scale trade should have been impossible, and yet, by the early first millennium BCE, goods were moving across thousands of kilometers with remarkable regularity. Tin from Iberia, copper from Cyprus, cedar from the Levant, luxury dyes, textiles, glass, and metalwork flowing through ports that shared no political allegiance but operated within the same economic logic. The architects of this system were they never built a traditional empire. They didn't field massive armies. They didn't impose laws on conquered populations. In truth, they never unified the Mediterranean by force at all. What they built was something far subtler and far more durable. They built a network. Phoenician society consisted of small coastal city-states like Tyre, Sidon, and Byblus. These cities were fragile. They lacked vast hinterlands. They couldn't endure long wars. Their survival didn't depend on walls or legions. It depended on ships, relationships, and reputation. If trade collapsed, they collapsed. That limitation shaped everything they did. When you lack coercive power, you're forced to cultivate trust. And when trust scales, value begins to standardize, whether anyone plans it or not. The first thing Phoenician traders standardized wasn't prices. It was behavior. In a world without international courts or enforceable contracts, commerce relied entirely on repeated interaction. A merchant who cheated might profit once and then vanish from the network forever. Ports communicated, traders exchanged information. Reputation traveled faster than ships. Trust became collateral. This is what modern audiences often miss. Trust wasn't ethical. It was economic. Reliability earned access. Dishonesty meant exclusion. And exclusion meant commercial extinction. When there are no courts, trust becomes extraordinarily costly to lose. Once this trust network took shape, prices began to align on their own. Not because anyone dictated them, but because competition punished deviations. Phoenician traders focused on commodities with clear utility and relatively stable demand. Metals like copper and tin, which combined to make bronze. Silver measured by weight, not by stamped authority. Timber essential for ships and construction. Goods whose value was functional, not arbitrary. Here's where the system quietly locked into place. If tin sold cheaply in Iberia and commanded a higher price in the eastern Mediterranean, traders moved it east. If copper was plentiful in Cyprus and scarce elsewhere, shipping routes shifted. Every profitable price gap attracted competitors, and competition erased the gap. This wasn't modern finance. It was arbitrage, and arbitrage predates empires. As Phoenician ships moved goods, price discrepancies collapsed. Over time, a merchant in Carthage couldn't wildly overcharge for copper if rivals knew its price elsewhere. Ports couldn't isolate themselves economically if ships could simply bypass them. Markets disciplined prices faster than kings ever could. There was no master plan, no council of merchants deciding what tin should cost. Standardization emerged as a byproduct of survival. Traders who adapted to market reality endured. Those who didn't disappeared. But the Phoenicians' true advantage wasn't metal or ships. It was information. They knew where harvests failed, which mines flooded, when wars disrupted routes. In an era where news moved at the speed of wind and oar, information was power. It allowed them to act before others even understood what was unfolding. They didn't just respond to prices, they anticipated them. By doing so, they smoothed volatility across regions. Shortages were relieved by supply elsewhere. Surpluses were absorbed before collapsing local value. Gradually, producers adjusted expectations. Farmers, miners, and craftsmen priced goods, not only according to local conditions, but based on what the broader Mediterranean market would accept. Ports synchronized. Inland economies lagged, and something unprecedented emerged. A de facto economic system that ignored political borders entirely. The Phoenicians never conquered the Mediterranean, but they made it legible, predictable, tradable. Economic integration didn't follow empire. Empire followed economic integration. That's where history textbooks often reverse cause and effect. And it's also where the story turns, because once prices stabilize, once markets scale, once value becomes predictable across regions, power takes notice. When prices stabilized across the Mediterranean, something irreversible occurred. Trade stopped being local. Value stopped being negotiated in isolation. Markets expanded beyond the control of any single ruler or city. This was the Phoenician system at its height, and the moment it became exposed. Standardized prices accelerated commerce. Faster commerce increased profits. Profitable systems attract attention, not from merchants, but from states. Because once value is predictable, it becomes taxable. And once it's taxable, authority moves in. The Greek city-states were among the first to formalize what Phoenician traders had practiced informally. They introduced stamped coinage, not to invent value, but to certify it. Coins weren't revolutionary. They were silver by weight, with a political guarantee attached. Markets already understood silver's worth. The state simply placed its seal on it and claimed authority over exchange. The Roman Empire would perfect this move. Rome didn't create Mediterranean trade. It inherited it. Routes were mapped. Ports were connected. Prices were already aligned. What Rome added was forced legions to secure lanes, laws to formalize contracts, and taxes to extract value from a system merchants had built without imperial permission. This is the irony of Phoenician success. By making markets efficient, they made them legible. And once markets are legible, they become governable. The Phoenicians didn't lose because their system failed. They lost because it worked too well. As states moved in, informal trust networks were replaced by formal institutions. Reputation gave way to regulation. Weighed metal gave way to coinage. Negotiated exchange gave way to taxation. Merchants adapted, so may tribed, but control had shifted. Markets unified the Mediterranean before empires ever could. But empires decided who captured the surplus, and this pattern didn't stop in antiquity. Fast forward to the modern world, and the structure feels familiar, only scaled beyond recognition. There is no global government, no single authority ruling international trade, yet prices for oil, wheat, copper, and shipping converge across continents. A drought in one region ripples worldwide. A blockage in one shipping lane raises costs thousands of miles away. Just like the ancient Mediterranean, value today is coordinated by networks, not borders. The US dollar functions much like Phoenician silver once did, not because it's imposed everywhere by law, but because markets accept it. Trust, liquidity, and information grant power long before politics does. And just as ancient traders priced goods by Mediterranean norms, modern economies price risk, debt, and assets using global benchmarks they don't control. Globalization didn't begin with container ships or digital exchanges. It began when merchants realized inefficiency was costly and coordination was profitable. But here's where the modern parallel becomes uncomfortable. Prices today synchronize globally. Wages do not. Goods adjust instantly. Labor adjusts slowly. Locally, painfully. Inflation spreads faster than income. Asset prices react before paychecks do. Those closest to information and liquidity adapt first. The rest experience the consequences later. The system still rewards early awareness and punishes delayed exposure. Nothing fundamental has changed. Only the scale. And just like in the ancient world, power didn't vanish. It repositioned itself. States learned to tax flows instead of land. Corporations learned to arbitrage regulation instead of geography. Individuals were left navigating systems that feel abstract, distant, and increasingly uncontrollable. Here's the lesson the Phoenicians left behind unintentionally. Power does not create markets. Markets create power. Those who standardize value don't need to rule openly. They influence outcomes quietly. And once systems grow large enough, no single actor can fully control them, only steer them, extract from them, or shield themselves from their consequences. Empires rise, believing they command markets. Markets endure by ignoring empires. This is why economic history isn't just about the past. It's about pattern recognition, because the mechanisms that shaped ancient trade still govern modern finance, only faster, larger, and harder to see. If you understand how prices converge, if you understand who benefits when they move, and if you recognize that coordination always comes before control, you stop mistaking stability for safety. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this shifted your perspective, subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.